Good morning, everyone. Last class we did the poem Keeping Quiet by the poet Pablo Neruda, wherein we saw that the poem actually begins with a note of quiet introspection, and the poet urges us to count to 12 and sit still, calmly, silently introspect, to ponder, and to question ourselves on our activities and lessen the divisions that we have created on the basis of race, language, and nationalities. Because he believes that this introspection and this quietness will be actually very exotic, will be actually very pleasant, and will give answers to so many questions. And that is why it has been described as sudden strangeness. So it will be very strange, very exotic, very blissful, wherein man and man will be united. We also saw how not only man and man will be united, but there will be a kind of unification between man and nature. When everyone on the earth thinks of keeping quiet for some time, and does not involve oneself in any activity, that moment will be a bliss. People who all are engaged in the exploitation of nature, green wars, or are preparing for kind of chemical wars, they will also change their ways. They will wear clean clothes and they will walk with their brothers in the peace doing nothing. So they will walk very peacefully and doing nothing. Peace walk in the shade. In the shade, remember I told you it's a metaphor, because just as a shade protects us from the harsh weather, the harsh sun rays, we will protect and shelter each other as brothers living in peace and harmony. And when he says doing nothing, he clarifies himself in the stanza when he says, "What I want should not be confused with total inactivity." So he cautions the readers that his quietness should not be confused with total inactivity, because life is certainly an ongoing process. It's very dynamic, it's always in motion. So it's not about inertia, it's not about death. He wants no truck with death. He uses an euphemism when he says, "I want no truck with death." So he says that he does not have any association with death. What he wants us to do is a kind of introspection where we actually uh, focus our minds and not keeping our lives mobile. So we only focus on our minds and our activities and stop being selfish and spend some time in deep silence doing nothing. And if we do so, we can get rid of the sadness. And what is the sadness? Sadness of never understanding ourselves. Since we do not understand ourselves, we are isolated. So, the sadness of isolation. So, in that hour of introspection, we will find time to understand ourselves better and escape from the threatening calls of death. Now, this last stanza where he says, "Perhaps the earth can teach us as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive." The poet feels that the earth is a very good teacher, and it can teach us how everything comes to an end and then again resurrects itself. Again, there is a kind of rebirth, comes back to life again. In the same manner, from this hour of silence, introspection, retrospection, one can actually learn the need to bring all evil thoughts to an end and bring about a new life of peace. So, he says earth can teach us. Why? Because there could be so many examples. If earth is seen from space, it seems to be dead. it seems to be lifeless. But as you come closer to Earth, you find so many things full of life. Earth is actually alive, with vehicles moving, with people walking here and there, birds chirping, full of greenery, water bodies, and so many things. But Earth never shouted. The process of resurrection is never noisy, it's silent, and that is why it's so beautiful. So he says, learn this thing from the earth: how to be silent yet to be active, how to be immobile yet to be mobile. So you see, earth can teach us when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. So you see, there are two opposite terms: dead and alive. Seems dead and later proves to be alive. This is again an antithesis. So, an antithetical thought has been put forward over here. So, seems dead and later proves to be alive. And then the poet brings an end to this session, and he instructs us all to keep quiet, because he also wants to delve into that deep tranquility. So he says that he would go and count to 12, and we should also continue with this quietness, with this tranquility, and he is actually exiting from the scene so that we are not disturbed and we can quietly proceed on with this exercise. So he says that I'm going from here. Now see, the title actually, it puts puts stress on the necessity of quiet introspection. Introspection is the key word uh, of this poem. Okay, so he wants us to introspect. The poet wants us to introspect. Why? Because this introspection is actually a remedy, is a panacea for so many things. It's also an antidote to war, violence, hatred. And with this quietness, we can not only understand ourselves, but then we will stop harming the world with death and destruction. Okay, so the title is very appropriate and it justifies the utility of remaining quiet in the world which is actually troubled by so much disturbance. There are various figures of speech we have already discussed. We will is repetition. In the first stanza, we will repetition. We will is an alliteration. We have discussed the figures of speech. Then you have let's and let's in the second stanza. Let's and let's, that's anaphora. Then you have sudden strangeness, the sound s being repeated. Sir is an alliteration. Arms, remember, not moving our arms so much, arms is a pun. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales. Cold sea, symbol of the indifferent world, of the cold world, the nonchalant world. And fishermen, symbolic of the oppressors of our society. Whales, actually, they are significant, they are symbolic of nature. Man gathering salt is the oppressed section of the society, who is actually looking at his hurt hands. Her, the sound her is being repeated. That is actually an alliteration. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire. So you have wars with and wars with, which is again a repetition. Victory with no survivors would put on clean clothes. Ka, the sound of ka is repeated, that's alliteration. And walk about with their brothers in the shade. Shade is a metaphor, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. No truck with death is an euphemism. If we were, alliteration, not so single minded, so single alliteration minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Perhaps the earth can teach us, earth will teach us. So, earth has been personified over here. Earth can teach us when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. So, dead and alive, over here we have an antithesis. In case I have missed out any figure of speech, do let me know. These are the figures of speech. Try answering these questions, what will counting up to 12 and keeping still help us achieve? I've already told you this counting 12 and keeping still will give us a kind of um, unific kind of uh, being united with other people and also with nature. So we will be united. It will help us to ponder on our activities. It will help us to introspect on what we are doing, where we are leading to. So it will help us to achieve the ecstatic moments of silence, and our thoughts will be rejuvenated. So we will attain that peace. Do you think the poet advocates total inactivity and death? No, no, he does not. That is why he clearly says that what I want should not be confused with total inactivity. What is the sadness that the poet refers to in the poem? Sadness of isolation, sadness of never understanding ourselves. What symbol from nature does the poet invoke to say that there can be life under apparent stillness? The resurrection of earth, life being resurrected when someone is dead. Again there is a new life blooming into a different soul. So these are the symbols which have been taken from nature, which uh, invokes the poet to say that there can be life under apparent stillness. With this I conclude today's class. Next class will move on to the first chapter of our second book, that is Vistas. Thank you.